The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, O Lord.
On a Sabbath, Jesus went to dine at the home of one of the leading Pharisees, and the people there were observing him carefully. He told a parable to those who had been invited, noticing how they were choosing the places of honor at the table. When you are invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not recline at table in the place of honor. A more distinguished guest than you may have been invited by him, and the host who invited both of you may approach you and say, "Give your place to this man," and then you would proceed with embarrassment to take the lowest place. Rather, when you are invited, go and take the lowest place, so that when the host comes to you, he may say, "My friend, move up to a higher position." Then you will enjoy the esteem of your companions at the table. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. Then he said to the host who invited him, "When you hold a lunch or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or your wealthy neighbors, in case they may invite you back and you have repayment. Rather, when you hold a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the blind, the lame. Blessed indeed will you be because of their inability to repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Did the parable that we just heard in the Gospel seem a little strange to you? Now, if you're anyone like myself who grew up Catholic, you've probably heard this parable 1,000,001 times. But its sharpness or its strangeness, we lose that if we don't pay close attention to it. What is Jesus saying in the parable? Don't take the highest place because you'll be embarrassed when you're asked to move to the lowest place. Rather, take the lowest place so that when the host approaches you, you can move up higher. And then you will enjoy the esteem of your companions at the table. This seems a little strange because Jesus seems to be upholding rather than overturning social conventions like he often does in other passages in the Gospel. Jesus understands the dynamics of honor and shame. He understands our pride and our ego, and he doesn't explicitly rail against these things. He doesn't condemn them and say they're evil. Rather, this parable seems strange, as though Jesus is giving us a lesson in clever social manners, a sort of underhanded way of ascending the social ladder at parties. But is this what really is going on? Even though it's a strange parable, there is something deeper. Jesus is using these things to teach us something about the kingdom in a very clever way, in a very almost crafty way. Like many of the other parables that we hear in the Gospels, the key to understanding this parable is provided by Christ at the very end, in those words. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. That is the key to understanding this odd parable. Now, on first glance, let's look at this sentence maybe with a bit of skepticism. The difference between these two, The one who exalts himself first and the one who humbles himself first seems to be somewhat superficial, right? Isn't the person who lowers himself first simply exalting himself, only to be exalted later? Or is he exalting himself but doing so in an underhanded sort of way? Now, obviously, there is a difference between these two people. And the key is the answer to this question. Who is the one who is doing the exalting? In the first instance, it's the individual, it's the guest, it's the person who is doing the exalting. In the second instance, it is another. It's the host. It is the person who receives the exalting. The person does not do it themselves. The truly humble person receives, or more precisely, the truly humble person recognizes that fundamentally we are recipients. We are not givers. Everything that we have is received. We do not give it to ourselves. The metaphysical truth, if you will, upon which true humility rests, harkens back to Exodus, what God spoke to Moses when he appeared to him on Mount Sinai. He told Moses, I am who am. And we are those who are not. St. Catherine of Siena, a great Dominican tertiary, receives mystical visions from Christ, and this is one of the things that Jesus told her. He told Catherine, I am he who is, and you are she who is not. Now, of course, this is not meant to be taken literally as though we do not really exist, but it's meant to remind us that most fundamentally, our existence, our being, our essay, if you will, everything that we have is received. We participate in the very existence of God. The humility that Christ is calling us to, cleverly, indirectly, but clearly, strikes at the heart of our pride, strikes at the heart of our ego. He undermines our social gains of honor and of shame. Now, there is an artist who draws cartoons, and I follow his account on Instagram. Some of you may be familiar with this guy. His cartoon series is called Strange Planet. And the characters in this comic strip are human beings doing normal, or they're like human beings going about doing normal things, but instead of being human beings, they're sort of stereotypically misshapen alien creatures. And they go about speaking using very large and odd words. Now, a recent comic that this guy posted on Instagram has two aliens sitting together on a couch. And the first one says to the other, we should return these objects to their receptacles. And the other alien who is sitting on the couch with his friend says, perhaps, but consider. The structure that we are in is a container. Thus, all objects, and his friend completes the sentence, all objects are in a container. And his friend replies, and you just imagine outside the container being his head. The first one sort of has a mind-blowing experience saying, whoa, while sitting in the container. And his friend says, precisely. What is the context of Jesus' parable? This whole story about ascending and descending the social ladder, it takes place in the context of a wedding feast. A wedding feast to which all of the guests are invited. The only way you get to a wedding feast is not by earning or deserving your presence there. You are there at a wedding feast at the graciousness of the host. And there is a radical equality among everyone because everyone is invited. No one has earned their presence there. What Christ wants us to see is that we are radically dependent, and that true freedom lies in letting go of our crazed, frenetic desire to be better than someone else, to be smarter than someone else, to be quicker, more good-looking than someone else. One of my cousins, when they were way back when in the 4th grade, my family on my mom's side of the family, my 4 uncles, sort of grew up as jocks in high school. And I mean that in the most affectionate sense of the word jock. They were football players, they were wrestlers, and so when they got married and had kids, it was sort of expected that all the kids would go on and play sports as well. So one of them was constantly being encouraged to play sports. But in 4th grade, he told his mom, "I don't have to be better than anyone else. I only have to be better than I was." If we receive honor, if we receive esteem, if it happens to us, great, fine. But there's a difference between receiving it with gratitude and pursuing it and setting our every thought and desire and counting on it. When we do receive wealth and power, how are we to use it? This is where Jesus gives a clear command. We are to use it for the good of people that can do us no good, for people who cannot possibly repay us, the poor, the crippled, the blind, the lame, giving, esteeming, caring for anyone who is socially rejected, those who are undesirable. That is how we are to use our honor, because Christ himself did, and he continues to do so. As we come forward to receive Christ's own gift of his body and his blood, may we imitate Christ, recognize that all we have received, and we are meant to share.